Mass tone. Mass tone is how close a pigment is to its natural form. Um, so you can have a pigment that is in its natural form was maybe a really bright red, and they have added some more um, other lighter colors in order to lighten it up or soften it up. But the mass tone is directly related to light fastness. So if it's in its truest form, it's most likely going to have the best light fastness as well. Not always the case, but sometimes. So mass tone is usually how close it is to its most natural occurring color. But definitely know the difference between those two for your test. Okay, so pigments are classified as either organic, inorganic, or blends. I want to clarify that the term organic has nothing to do with the organic we use for our food. It's not at all the same. So if you get a client or if you see people advertise like only using organic pigments, that's not good. It's not, organic pigments are not necessarily what you need to be using. It just means that they contain hydrogen and carbon. That's it. That's all it means. So right. And it doesn't, just because it says organic doesn't mean it's natural. You can still have an organic product that's made in a lab. So it just means hydrogen and carbon. So your test question might say something like, which pigments contain carbon? And you might have organic or inorganic as your options. So organic, it contains hydrogen and carbon. We do not ever use organic pigments as a straight pigment. The reason why is because our bodies break down hydrogen and carbon very, very easily, so they will not last. The only time that you guys will use organic pigments is when they are an addition to an inorganic pigment. If you use a straight organic, you don't know what's going to happen. So to translate this, have you guys heard of henna hair color? The same idea, right? Like henna can be, you don't really always know what color you're going to get with henna. It sometimes can go really, really dark. It sometimes you don't know, but it's not the same as henna, but it's the same idea that it's just kind of it's its own line there. So you can have pigments that have organic in it, but using it straight as your only pigment is not reliable and is not a good thing. We'd see them sometimes as dyes, which means that they're chemicals that produce color when dissolved. You won't actually use them as dyes. What you guys would use them as would be a toner or a lake. So a toner means there is no inorganic pigments. You could buy a separate organic and add it into some of your pigments because organics are really, really vibrant and really, really pretty. They do not last, but they look very pretty at the very beginning of the appointment. So if that's something you choose to want to do, I'm sorry. How long do they last? Usually they break down in the skin within about 30 days. Mm-hmm. And we do see them as lakes. So the pigment that I passed around, guys, that's called loaded. That one is made of really strong, it's loaded with organic pigment, but it's added to inorganic pigment. And we'll look at those ingredients in a second. Actually, let's look at them right now. Can you read us the ingredients on that one? Okay, do you want me to read them to you guys? Okay, so this one, the first ingredient is water, sterile water. So that tells us we could always add water back into it, right? Glycerin, so it's going to be really smooth, velvety. Isopropyl alcohol, so it's going to sting and could potentially dry out. Then we see all these, I call them hippie words. So the hippie words mean they have properties in them that help our appointment. So Himalayas virginiana distillate, which is going to help with swelling as you work. Calcium sodium phosphate. I want to say I looked that one up, and it has a pain property to it. It helps with pain. Then we see if this one has a bunch of extra ingredients, soy lecithin, which is going to make it smooth. Then as we go down, it has glycerol stearate. That's also another one of our substrates there. And then we have a list of colors. CI 77891, 56298, 11740, 18. These are all numbers here that are all the powder. So when we see them numbered that way, that tells us that they are it's going to be made in a lab, synthesized in a lab. Okay, this one, they tell us that has lots of organic pigment in it. If you go to the company, that's what they pride themselves on, is the organic part. What we found with these is that they look so pretty right when you finish. Then they come back for their touch-ups, it looks totally different. So you don't always know exactly what's happening in there. And that's because that organic that's super loaded at the beginning, that's so pretty, gets broke down by the body over time. So be careful with organics. Let's look at some other ingredients. Will you guys hand me some other ones? This one is a derma. Derma, for the most part, is always so safe. They're just really safe products. Her ingredients, number one ingredient, iron oxide. Then alcohol, then distilled water, then glycerin. So this whole product is an iron oxide. That's the only powder that we have in here. Iron oxides are going to fade red. They will just fade on the warmer side. Now this is a black. So a black that fades to more of a warmer color for an eyeliner, that sounds perfect to me. That's for Derma. Very simple. Her stuff is always simple, very straightforward. Tina Davies. So this is her ebony. This is her darkest brown. Number one, yellow 14, red 254, black 7, aqua. These are all numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So that tells us that these are all going to be inorganics, but they were synthesized in a lab. And when we see that, that's a synthetic. So synthesized in a lab, synthetic, they're going to fade gray. So anytime you see, same thing with this one, anytime you see the numbers there, black number whatever, yellow number 65, red 254, those always tell us they're going to fade ashy. Synthetics fade gray. This one has the Himalayas virginiana extract. That's great. That's helpful. This one uses isopropyl alcohol and benzyl alcohol to make it into a liquid.
Go back to the last one you said, the lab colors always.
Synthetics always fade to gray. So this one is the world famous tattoo ink line. These ones all have numbers to start, and it also has Himalayas virginiana extract, but this is a red. So even though it's gonna technically be on the ashier side, it's a red. I'm not too worried about it fading ashy in the lips, right? And then these are practice pigments. This is iron oxide, titanium dioxide, glycerin, and ethanol. These are from like Amazon or eBay or something. We just use them for you guys to practice with. And this will in a year will be like bright red in the eyes, in the eyebrows. The iron oxides are will just fade red, but when you use like a not great line, they tend to be more so. So, but this uses glycerin and ethanol for its substrates. So, back to organics. Organics are unstable, very unstable. They're carbon-based. They shift position, known for migration. They can bleed quite a bit. Generally, they are brighter and bolder in color. We see them a lot in lip pigments. Water soluble, that's why they fade quickly. They can be coated with alumina to extend their life. Not often do we use them by themselves? And that's pretty much it for organics. So jumping into inorganics. So as organics are made from carbon and hydrogen, inorganics are made of iron and oxygen. Well, let's talk about this. Iron and oxygen, okay? Everybody think of a piece of steel, piece of iron that sits out in the rain. What happens? It rusts, right? So iron rusts under our skin because we have water and oxygen in our skin. That's why iron oxides will fade to red, because it essentially is rust underneath the skin. Iron components are very stable, very non-toxic. Usually inorganic pigments are more muted, they're less intense, they're soft, natural. That's why they're great for permanent makeup. Due to their larger particle size, inorganic pigments usually offer better coverage, they last a long time, they withstand UV exposure very well, whereas organics do not. So although they're originally mined from natural sources, inorganic pigments are now produced synthetically in laboratories to better monitor quality and purity. If you see that iron oxide, still titanium dioxide, those are all inorganic pigments that are from natural sources. When we see those numbers, those are called synthetics. And they're all still inorganics, just to be clear. So iron oxides are binary compounds, very stable. They fade to red, like we talked about. Some great colors that you might see when you're doing an eyeliner that we talked about that could potentially be more of a turquoise colored eyeliner. If you see chromium hydroxide green or an ultramarine, those are going to be very long-standing, very good colors to use. Manganese violet is really great for lips, for lip colors. And yeah, that's it for those. So blends are kind of the best of both worlds. Organic and inorganic pigments together mean that they're going to be really beautiful and vibrant in the beginning, but then that organic fades out. Iron oxides will always fade to reddish. A lot other colorants will fade to gray. Synthetics fade to gray. So please just make sure you guys are reading your ingredients. If you have questions about any of those ingredients as you go, let me know. Okay, so when it comes to pain, which we have to talk about because you guys will be inflicting pain upon your clients, each client that you have is going to have a different pain tolerance. Everybody's is different. All of our nerves lie differently underneath our skin as well, so not all your clients are going to feel pain in the exact same place. Factors that can play into a person feeling more or less pain, therefore experiencing more or less stress, would be hormones. Hormones play a huge factor. Your clients who are close to that time of the month, or if they are close to menopause, are going to be, they're going to have a harder time with pain. Other clients hearing from other clients that it's painful, or reading online that it's painful, whatever, they typically will come in expecting to be in more pain. A client having a fear of needles can affect their pain tolerance. Clients that work out seem to do much better at handling their pain. They're used to putting themselves through pain every day, right? So counting can help them. I don't know if my mom told you that, but I feel like that is such a helpful tool that I use with clients is you count down or count up. Counting down seems to be better even, especially if you have clients who are athletes. They can just 5 more seconds, 5, 4, 3, it helps them get to the end. Redheads, do you guys all know the deal with redheads? Do you know about this? Okay, so redheads have very different nerve endings. Yes, so it's a thing, it's a total thing. This is not just something random. Redheads feel, they are they're just nerve endings are different. So typically they are not as sensitive to pain medicines or any sort of topical numbings. Don't work on them. So a lot of times they, even at the dentist numbing shots, everything doesn't work on them. So they, which means that they might feel it more, but sometimes it also means that they're incredibly weirdly tough. It's the strangest thing. So I have a really good friend who's a redhead, and she hates going to the dentist because none of the shots ever work on her at all. But my mom did her permanent makeup a long time ago when we were in college. She like fell asleep getting her eyeliner done. It felt nothing. She said it felt like a tickle. Like she has the craziest pain tolerance. So if you have someone who comes in that's a redhead, ask them because they know. Redheads, they all know. Um, so it's a thing for sure. So most of the time it means that they have a very high pain tolerance, but they're less affected by the numbing creams. So numbing creams, we're going to jump into that. It's kind of a big topic of debate among the permanent makeup world. The reason why is because there are some technicians who believe that numbing creams can make your pigment not as your color retention not as well, not as great. And the reason why is because, and they're not wrong, but it's because when you are stressed, you have blood that rushes to the skin. Numbing creams essentially cause the skin to be in a state of stress, and so it rushes blood to the surface of the skin. However, if somebody is very uncomfortable and very stressed out and in a lot of pain, it's going to be about the same outcome. So, in my mind, I'd rather have my client be comfortable. That's kind of our motto in here. But stress equals more blood. And I mean, you think about body artists, we don't typically numb for those too. So, it's up to you guys. But so yes, it does bring blood to the area. And if you, in an ideal world, it would not be as painful and you could not use numbing creams and you would get the best color retention. But that's not always the case. That's not the case. So we prefer them because our clients' comfort is huge to us. We want them to have a good experience. We don't want them miserable. Um, Also, there are some really great ingredients in our numbing creams. You guys have Zensa in your kits, correct? So Zensa has a vaso constrictor that's in the ingredients that make um, the blood vessels restrict. So there's not as much swelling and not as much blood in the area when you're using Zensa. So if you don't use Zensa, you might, if you guys later on decide to use something else, you might be using a primary and then a secondary. So Zensa can be used for both. You can use Zensa for a primary and a secondary. So after you break that blood barrier, you can put more Zensa on. But there are some numbing creams that are just specifically for an initial primary, and then some that you can only use as a secondary. The secondary usually has ingredients in it like epinephrine. Obviously, you can't use that next to the eye, but epinephrine is a vasoconstrictor. So it also reduces all that swelling and blood in the area, and can help if your client is sneezing. So with eyebrows, you feel like you have to sneeze all the time. So it helps with that as well. So primaries typically just have lidocaine in them, especially if you're working around the eyebrow. It's just lidocaine, but benzocaine and tetracaine can also, just around the eyelid. So eyelid, you can only use lidocaine. You can't use tetracaine and benzocaine. For eyebrows, you can use lidocaine and tetracaine, but you can't use benzocaine. They're strongest to weakest. Benzocaine is really strong, so don't ever use that other than on the lips. And then the secondaries have can have those same ingredients, but usually with the addition of epinephrine. So patch testing, we talked about this yesterday, but our state, it's recommended that you always perform a patch test on a client before you work on them. It's an allergy test where you put the pigment, the numbing cream, and anything else that you will use into separate scratches of the skin to see if the client has a reaction to any products. Our state only requires that you test the pigment, but the pigment is not always what people have an allergy to, so it doesn't really make sense. The manufacturer of the pigment will list how long it will take for the reaction to occur. Test is done somewhere inconspicuous, like behind the ear, which is the port on the post-auricular muscle. I put that on there because that is a test question. Where would you do a patch test on the post-auricular muscle? In the hairline, on the shoulder, it's over here. The post-auricular muscle. So the test is not very accurate for a couple of reasons. It can take a client months or even years to show a sign of an allergy. Sometimes a reaction might be triggered by exposure to UV after years. The exact color that you will use will have to be tested, and sometimes we need to adjust our color while we're working. The depth of the skin would need to be exact, and the amount of the allergen does not have an effect on the reaction. So you might have a client that when you do a patch test and you put a tiny bit of the pigment in, has no problem, but you could do a full eyebrow and they're going to react. So that's why a patch test isn't very accurate. So my recommendation, this is not textbook for your test, do a patch test on everybody who comes in, okay? My recommendation, if you have a client who comes in and they tell you that they are typically have allergies to a lot of makeup, a lot of, they can't get their hair colored because they are allergic to the hair color. They have very sensitive skin. They really struggle with um, hay fever and allergies altogether. That might be a good time for you to do a patch test to make sure that they aren't going to react. So MRIs and permanent makeup. MRI is, of course, if you end up with an injury of some sort, you might have to get an MRI. There is a chance that the permanent makeup area could burn under an MRI machine. So you have to have this in your consent forms. You have to have some sort of wordage. So that's what I have here. I understand that tattoos may cause an MRI machine a warming, tingling, or painful sensation to the permanent cosmetic area. I accept the risks, blah, 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 blah. Is it common? No. We put the pigment in an area in the dermis where it's not super deep under the skin. It should not cause an issue, but you still do have to warn your clients just to be safe. Body art has the same potential to do that. Our cavities, our fillings from the dentist have the potential to do that. So your client really shouldn't be worried about it. We have had a student that came through that she was covered. She had sleeves and full tattoos. She got an MRI and she had one of her tattoos of her entire body burned. And she just, she had him stop right away. She said she could just feel it under the skin like it was like a bee sting. So she had him stop right away and they just couldn't finish it. But it was only one area. So I've never heard this actually being an issue, but they talk about this a lot through all of our books. So I think it absolutely is something you need to be aware of.